The negotiations stretched across 6 long months. Ambassador Henry Cole led the human delegation from a diplomatic station that orbited the Council homeworld. Henry had been trained for this role since childhood, studying alien cultures and political systems while growing up on New Terra. He understood that every species at the negotiating table had their own agenda, their own fears, their own calculations about what humanity's return meant for the balance of power. The Azurians supported human independence immediately, seeing potential allies against their aggressive neighbors. The Sarkonian traders wanted access to human markets and technology. The Valorians tried to save face by proposing that humanity accept limited autonomy under Council supervision. Henry rejected that proposal within seconds. The biggest obstacle was the Krenet Dominion. Supreme Chancellor Vex refused to accept that the systems humanity occupied were legally theirs. He claimed that the Nebula region fell within traditional Krenet expansion territory, even though his people had never actually explored it. The argument was clearly false, but Vex had support from several species who feared what an independent humanity might mean for their own territorial claims. Tensions rose. Krenet warships began massing near the nebula's edge. Human ships responded by establishing defensive positions. War seemed inevitable. Then Commander Olivia Reed's intelligence network uncovered something that changed everything. Olivia had taken over Claire Mitchell's role after Claire retired. She ran agents throughout Council space and had been investigating the Krenet military buildup that Walter Nash had first reported years ago. What she found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Krenet were not preparing to attack humanity. They were preparing to defend against something else, something they had kept secret from the entire Council. The files Olivia's agents stole from Krenet military computers told a terrifying story. For the past 10 years, colonies on the far edge of Krenet space had been going silent. At first, the disappearances were blamed on equipment failures or pirate attacks. But the pattern was too consistent. Entire worlds stopped transmitting, their populations vanishing without distress calls or survivors. Krenet investigation teams found the colonies completely destroyed, all technology stripped away, all organic life eliminated. The attackers left no traces except the devastation itself. The Krenet military had encountered the enemy 3 years ago. They called them the Scourge, an appropriate name for something that consumed everything in its path. The Scourge were not organic beings but machines, artificial intelligence gone wrong in ways that made Council fears about AI seem justified. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, did not want anything except to dismantle civilizations and incorporate their technology. The Krenet had lost 17 colonies and countless ships trying to stop them. Now the Scourge were pushing deeper into Council space and the Krenet were desperate. That explained everything. The Krenet military buildup, their aggressive claims about the Nebula territory, their hostility toward humanity's independence. They needed somewhere to relocate millions of refugees before the Scourge overran more worlds. They saw the systems humanity occupied as their only escape route. Vex had kept the Scourge threat secret because admitting it would cause panic throughout the Council and reveal how badly the Krenet military had failed to contain the problem. Olivia brought the intelligence to President Ross immediately. Elizabeth read through the files twice, her face growing more grim with each page. She called an emergency meeting with Admiral Dunn, Governor Sanders, and Ambassador Cole. The question they faced was simple but profound. Should humanity reveal the Krenet secret to the Council, or should they keep quiet and let the Krenet deal with their own problems? After all, the Krenet had supported humanity's exile 50 years ago. Some might argue they deserved whatever fate the Scourge brought them. Elizabeth listened to the arguments on both sides and then made her decision. Humanity would reveal the threat and offer assistance, not because the Krenet deserved help, but because the Scourge would not stop with Krenet territory. Eventually, they would reach human space. Eventually, they would threaten Earth itself. Better to fight them now with allies than later alone. Besides, this was a chance to prove that humanity could be trusted, that they were not the threat the Council had feared. The revelation at the next Council session caused exactly the chaos Elizabeth had expected. Vex tried to deny everything at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. Other species demanded to know why the Krenet had kept such a critical threat secret. The Valorians accused Vex of endangering the entire galactic community. Several species began evacuating their colonies near Krenet space immediately. The Council was on the verge of collapse. General William Cross proposed a joint military operation in the confusion. William was Admiral Dunn's second in command, a tactical genius who had studied every major conflict in galactic history. He argued that the Scourge could be defeated if the Council species combined their forces. The machines were powerful, but they followed predictable patterns. Human technology, combined with the Council's numerical superiority, could turn the tide. He offered to share human jump point manipulation technology, the breakthrough that Laura Bennett had achieved years ago, if the Council agreed to form a unified command structure. The debate lasted 3 days. Some species refused to trust humanity with military coordination. Others pointed out that they had no better options. The Azurians threw their full support behind the proposal. Eventually, a coalition formed. Not the full council, but enough species to make a difference. The first joint human-alien military force in history assembled at a staging area near the Scourge front line. Admiral Patricia Dunn took overall command, working alongside Azurian Fleet Master Corvin, who commanded the largest contingent of alien ships. The combined fleet numbered 400 vessels, 200 from the coalition species, 100 from humanity, and another 100 support ships. It was the largest military force assembled in Council space in over a century. The target was Sigma Station, a major Krenet facility that the Scourge had captured 6 months earlier. Intelligence suggested the machines were using it as a hub to coordinate attacks across multiple systems. If the coalition could destroy the station, they would disrupt Scourge operations throughout the sector. The Battle of Sigma Station began badly. The Scourge had fortified the station with defensive platforms and stationed hundreds of their own ships in the area. The machines fought with ruthless efficiency, coordinating their attacks perfectly and exploiting every weakness in the coalition fleet's formations. Council ships started taking heavy casualties within the first hour. Their shields could not withstand the Scourge weapons. Their coordination broke down under sustained assault. Their captains made decisions based on outdated tactical doctrine. The human contingent performed better, but they were outnumbered. Stephen Hughes led Red Squadron, a group of 20 fighters tasked with taking out the Scourge command hub deep inside the station. He had trained for this mission for months, practicing the attack run in simulations until he could fly it blindfolded. But simulations did not capture the chaos of real combat. The way ships exploded around you, the way your displays lit up with threat warnings until you could barely think. Stephen lost half his squadron in the first attack run. The Scourge defenses were too strong and the approach vector too exposed. He pulled back and regrouped with the survivors. His tactical officer suggested they abort and wait for support, but Stephen knew there was no time. The coalition fleet was being torn apart. If they did not destroy that command hub in the next few minutes, they would lose the entire battle. He made a decision that would either save the fleet or kill him. Instead of approaching from the exterior where the defenses were strongest, he would jump his squadron directly inside the station using the emergency jump point technology. It was insanely dangerous jumping into a space station without knowing exactly what you would emerge into, but it was the only way past the defenses. Stephen gave his squadron the option to stay behind. Not one of them took it. The jump lasted less than a second but felt like an eternity. When they emerged, they were inside the station's main hangar surrounded by Scourge ships and automated defenses. Stephen did not give anyone time to react. He fired everything his fighter had at the command hub structure, emptied his weapons completely in a single devastating barrage. The other fighters did the same. The command hub exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations that ripped through the station's interior. The effect was immediate. Scourge ships throughout the system suddenly lost coordination. They continued fighting, but without the unified strategy that had made them so deadly. The coalition fleet rallied and pressed the attack. Within 2 hours, they had destroyed or driven off every Scourge ship in the system. Sigma Station was a burning wreck, but the battle was won. Stephen limped back to the fleet with 5 fighters left out of 20. He had lost friends in that battle, pilots he had trained with and flown beside for years. But their sacrifice had proven something important. The Scourge could be beaten. Machines, no matter how advanced, could not match organic creativity and willingness to risk everything for a cause. The Victo. Captain Nicole Grant was 3 days into a routine patrol along the nebula's outer edge when her communications officer picked up the distress signal. The message was weak and breaking up, but the language was unmistakable. It was human, and it was coming from just inside Council space. Nicole's ship, the Defiant, was one of the newest vessels in the fleet, built with all the advanced technology that 50 years of isolation had produced. She had strict orders never to cross into Council space, never to reveal herself to alien sensors. But that distress call changed everything. The message identified the ship as the Mercury, a civilian transport that had gotten lost trying to navigate around the nebula. Pirates had found them first. The Mercury was unarmed and their shields were failing. They had maybe 20 minutes before the hull breached. Nicole looked at her tactical officer and saw the same conflict in his eyes. If they crossed into Council space to help, they would expose humanity's secret. If they did nothing, innocent humans would die. Nicole made her decision in less than 5 seconds. She ordered the Defiant to jump. They emerged less than 1,000 kilometers from the battle. The Mercury was a small ship, maybe 50 years old, probably from Earth's merchant fleet. 3 pirate vessels were hammering it with weapons fire, toying with it like predators playing with wounded prey. The pirates were using outdated Council military hardware, the kind that got sold on the black market when newer models came along. Against the Mercury, they were more than enough. Against the Defiant, they were nothing. Nicole did not bother with warnings. The Defiant's weapon systems were tied into the AI coordinator, capable of targeting multiple enemies simultaneously with precision that no organic gunner could match. 3 particle beams lanced out and struck the pirate ships in rapid succession. The first pirate lost its engines and went dead in space. The second lost its weapons array. The third tried to run and lost its jump drive before it could escape. The entire engagement lasted 18 seconds. The Mercury's captain was broadcasting thanks and questions at the same time, his voice shaking with relief and confusion. He wanted to know who had saved them, where they had come from, what ship could move and shoot like that. Nicole knew she should jump away immediately, leave before more ships arrived. But the Mercury's crew had seen them, had recorded everything. The secret was already compromised. She made another decision and opened a channel. Her voice was calm and professional as she identified herself as Captain Nicole Grant of the Human Stellar Coalition warship Defiant. She asked if the Mercury needed medical assistance. The silence that followed lasted almost 10 seconds. Then the Mercury's captain found his voice and asked the question that Nicole had no good answer for. The Human Stellar Coalition did not exist in any official records. Humanity was supposed to be confined to Sol system, restricted to slower-than-light travel outside their home system. Where had this ship come from, and how did it have technology that made Council warships look primitive? Nicole told him the truth, or at least part of it. Not all humans had gone back to Earth 50 years ago. Some had chosen exile in the unknown regions. They had survived, built new homes, and developed new technology. The Defiant was proof of what humanity could accomplish without Council restrictions. She told the Mercury to make for the nearest Council station and report what had happened. Then she jumped away before any Council ships could respond to the battle. Admiral Christopher Ward received Nicole's report 4 hours later and immediately declared a security lockdown. Every ship was recalled to base. Every monitoring station went to high alert. Every agent in Council space was ordered to go dark and await instructions. Christopher had been preparing for this moment since taking command of the fleet, but he had hoped it would happen on humanity's terms, not because of a random pirate attack. Now they had to manage a crisis that was spiraling out of control. The Mercury made it to Council Station Alpha 12 and told their story to anyone who would listen. The station administrator tried to suppress the information but failed. Too many people had heard. Too many had seen the sensor logs that the Mercury had transmitted. Within 48 hours, the entire sector was buzzing with rumors about a mysterious human warship with impossible capabilities. Within a week, the rumors reached the Council homeworld. The Galactic Council demanded answers from Earth's government. The human delegation on Earth was completely blindsided. They knew nothing about any colonies beyond Sol system, nothing about advanced warships, nothing about a human stellar coalition. They told the Council the truth, that if such a ship existed, it was operating without Earth's knowledge or approval. The Council did not believe them. Species did not just develop advanced military technology in secret. Someone had to be supporting this rogue. Faction President Elizabeth Ross received the crisis reports in her office on New Terra. Elizabeth had been elected president of the Human Stellar Coalition 3 years earlier, the first leader chosen by popular vote rather than appointed by necessity. She was 62 years old, born during the Exodus on the Pioneer. She had never seen Earth but had studied its history extensively. She knew that humanity's time of hiding was over. The only question was how to handle the revelation. Her advisors were divided. Admiral Dunn wanted to maintain defensive positions and wait for the Council to make the first move. Governor Sanders argued for immediate contact to control the narrative. Claire Mitchell suggested they do nothing and let the Council exhaust themselves trying to find the hidden colonies. Elizabeth listened to them all and then made her decision. Humanity would reveal themselves on their own terms, with strength and confidence, not as supplicants begging for acceptance. She ordered Admiral Kevin Hart to prepare a fleet for a diplomatic mission. Kevin was younger than most admirals, only 47, but he had distinguished himself in countless simulations and training exercises. He selected 20 ships for the mission, enough to demonstrate strength without appearing aggressive. The ships would escort Elizabeth herself to the Council homeworld, where she would request a hearing. Not to ask permission, but to announce that humanity had returned to the galactic stage. The journey took 3 weeks through normal jump space. Elizabeth used the time to refine her speech and prepare for questions she knew would come. Admiral Hart spent the time running combat drills, preparing for the possibility that the Council would respond with force rather than diplomacy. The fleet emerged in Council space at the edge of the homeworld system and broadcast their intentions on all frequencies. They were human, they came in peace, and they requested an audience with the full Council. The response was chaos. Council security forces scrambled to intercept them but stopped when they saw the human fleet's capabilities. The ships moved with coordination that suggested advanced AI control, something the Council had banned millennia ago. Their shields were stronger than anything in the Council's arsenal. Their weapons, while not activated, were clearly capable of significant destruction. A single Council admiral made the decision to allow them to approach rather than start a war his fleet would likely lose. The Council chamber was packed when Elizabeth Ross walked to the central podium. Representatives from 47 species watched her with emotions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Prime Sevix, the same Valorian who had presided over humanity's exile, still led the Council. Elizabeth could see the shock in the aliens' crystalline features. She had prepared a long speech explaining humanity's survival, their technological advancement, their desire for peaceful coexistence. But standing there in front of the Council that had cast her people into darkness, she changed her mind. She spoke simply and directly. 50 years ago, the Council had declared humanity incompatible with galactic civilization and exiled them. They had expected humans to either die in the unknown or return to Earth in defeat. Neither had happened. Instead, humanity had built a civilization beyond Council space, developed technology beyond Council capabilities, and proven that they did not need permission to reach for greatness. The Human Stellar Coalition controlled 27 systems, had a population of 3 million, and possessed military capabilities that would make any Council member think twice before showing aggression. They had not come to ask forgiveness for surviving. They had come to announce their existence and propose peaceful relations. The chamber erupted. Some delegates demanded to know exactly where these human colonies were located. Others wanted details about their technology. The Krenet delegate, a massive warrior named Supreme Chancellor Vex, declared that any unauthorized colonies in unexplored space were still subject to Council jurisdiction. The Azurian delegate, a thoughtful being called Delegate Thorn, welcomed humanity's return and apologized for the exile. Arguments broke out between delegates, old alliances fractured, new possibilities emerged. Elizabeth waited for the noise to die down, and then delivered her final statement. The Human Stellar Coalition would not submit to Council authority. They had survived without the Council and would continue to thrive with or without recognition. However, they preferred cooperation to conflict. They were willing to establish diplomatic relations, share certain technologies, and participate in galactic affairs as an independent power. 50 years after the Exodus, humanity controlled 27 star systems hidden within the nebula. Admiral Patricia Dunn commanded a fleet of 60 warships that would have made the Galactic Council's navies look obsolete. The ships were fast, armed with weapons that could tear through shields the Council considered impenetrable, and coordinated by artificial intelligence systems that gave them an advantage no alien force could match. But Patricia knew that military might alone would not protect humanity. The real war was being fought in the shadows, in the corridors of council stations and the trade hubs of a dozen species, by humans that most aliens did not even realize were human. Agent Gregory Lane sat in a cafe on Station Meridian, one of the largest trading posts in council space. He looked nothing like a human anymore. The genetic modifications had reshaped his face, added a ridge of bone across his forehead, changed his skin tone to the pale blue of a Sarkonian trader. His eyes were completely black now, no whites visible, exactly like the species he was impersonating. The modifications went deeper than appearance. His blood chemistry had been altered, his internal organs shifted slightly. If a doctor examined him, they would find a Sarkonian body with only the faintest hints that something was wrong. Gregory had been living this lie for 3 years now. He ran a small trading business that gave him an excuse to travel between systems and ask questions that would seem innocent. Today he was meeting a contact, a real Sarkonian who worked in the council's administrative offices. The Sarkonian arrived late, nervous and looking over his shoulder. Gregory ordered drinks and waited. The alien finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He had accessed files like Gregory requested, records from 50 years ago about the human exile. The price was 10,000 credits transferred to an account that could not be traced. Gregory paid without arguing. The data chip changed hands under the table, invisible to the cafe's security cameras. The Sarkonian left quickly and Gregory sat alone, nursing his drink and thinking about the risk he had just taken. If council security discovered what was on that chip, they would track the Sarkonian first, then investigate everyone he had contact with. Gregory would need to disappear for a while, assume a new identity, start over in a different sector. It was the life he had chosen when he volunteered for deep cover operations. Intelligence Director Claire Mitchell reviewed Gregory's report from her office on New Terra. The office was underground, buried beneath 300 meters of rock and shielded against any possible surveillance. Claire had built humanity's spy network from nothing, recruiting volunteers and training them in deception, infiltration, and survival. She had agents like Gregory scattered across council space, 63 operatives living as aliens and gathering information. The network had cost 12 lives so far, agents who were discovered and killed before they could escape. Claire remembered each name and carried the weight of their sacrifice. The data Gregory had stolen was explosive. Claire read through it twice to make sure she understood correctly. The human exile had not been a unanimous decision. 7 species on the council had voted against it, arguing that humanity deserved a chance to adapt to galactic society. But a coalition of older species had pushed the exile through, led by the Valorians and supported by the Krenet Dominion. The official reason was human aggression, but the real motivation was clearly stated in the internal documents. Humanity's rate of technological advancement threatened the established power structure. In 200 years, humans had nearly caught up to species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. If allowed to continue, humans might eventually surpass them. Claire forwarded the report to Governor Sanders and Admiral Dunn with her own analysis attached. The Council had not exiled humanity out of fear they would start wars. They had exiled humanity out of fear they would end the dominance of the old powers. It changed everything about how they should approach the eventual revelation of their survival. Diplomat Walter Nash operated from a completely different angle. He was not modified to look like an alien. Instead, he simply pretended to be a human who had never left Sol system, a traitor from Earth who had gotten special permission to operate in Council space. It was risky, because any serious background check would reveal he did not exist in Earth's records. But Walter had a talent for making people trust him. He asked the right questions, laughed at the right jokes, and never pushed too hard for information. His current target was a Krenet merchant who dealt in restricted technology. The Krenet were a warrior species, proud and aggressive, who controlled a significant portion of the Council's military production. Walter had been cultivating this relationship for 6 months, slowly building trust. Today they sat in a private room at a station bar, sharing drinks that would have poisoned most species but barely affected Krenet biology. Walter pretended to get drunk while staying completely sober, a trick he had learned years ago. The merchant finally opened up about something Walter had been digging at for months. The Krenet military was expanding rapidly, building new ships and recruiting more soldiers. The official reason was piracy suppression, but the merchant laughed at that. Everyone knew the real reason. There was something happening beyond Krenet space. Something the government was keeping quiet. Colonies were going dark, ships were disappearing. The Krenet were preparing for war against an enemy they had not publicly acknowledged. Walter filed his report as soon as he left the bar. Claire Mitchell read it and immediately called an emergency meeting. If the Krenet were facing an external threat serious enough to warrant military buildup, the Council had bigger problems than wondering what happened to humanity. It also represented a potential opportunity. An enemy of the Krenet might be willing to overlook humanity's unsanctioned existence. Dr. Laura Bennett worked in a completely different kind of laboratory than Karen Blake. While Karen focused on ships and weapons, Laura studied the fundamental nature of jump space itself. Jump drives worked by creating a tunnel through an alternate dimension, allowing ships to cross vast distances almost instantly. The technology was ancient, given to younger species by the Council founders and supposedly perfected millions of years ago. But Laura had found flaws in the design, inefficiencies that suggested the technology was not as perfect as everyone believed. Her breakthrough came on a night when she should have been sleeping. The jump point network that connected all of Council space operated on fixed nodes, natural weak points in space-time that made jumping easier and safer. But Laura discovered that these nodes could be manipulated. With enough energy and the right frequency modulation, you could create temporary jump points anywhere. The implications were staggering. A fleet could appear deep in enemy territory without warning. Supply lines became meaningless. The entire strategic balance of space warfare would shift. Laura immediately classified her findings at the highest level. She showed them only to Admiral Dunn and Governor Sanders. If this technology leaked to the Council, it would restart the arms race that humanity was trying to avoid. But if kept secret, it gave humanity an advantage that might make them untouchable. Fleet Commander Jacob Stone began training Special Forces teams based on Laura's discovery. The idea was simple but brutal. Small teams would jump directly into hostile territory, complete their mission and jump out before anyone could respond. No supply ships, no reinforcements, no retreat. Either you completed the mission or you died trying. Jacob recruited volunteers from the most experienced soldiers and pilots. Stephen Hughes was one of the first to apply. He had waited years for a chance to do more than train others, to actually test himself against the galaxy. The first mission was reconnaissance. A team of 5 jumped directly into orbit around a Council military shipyard, stayed just long enough to gather detailed sensor data, and jumped out. The entire operation lasted 4 minutes. The Council never even detected them. The data they brought back showed ship designs, production rates, and defensive capabilities. It was intelligence that would have taken conventional spies months to gather. Gregory Lane's cover was finally blown during his 40-second mission. He had gotten careless, asked one too many questions about Council military deployments. Security officers arrested him at his apartment and began the interrogation process. It took them 6 hours to realize he was not actually Sarkonian. By then, Gregory had activated his emergency beacon. The signal reached Claire Mitchell's office, bounced through 3 relay stations, and triggered an automated response. A rescue team jumped into orbit above the station, breached the security facility, extracted Gregory, and jumped out. The entire operation took 11 minutes. Gregory survived, but his cover identity was destroyed. Worse, the Council now knew for certain that someone was running intelligence operations against them. They did not know it was humanity, not yet, but they would start investigating. Governor Sanders faced a decision he had been avoiding for years. They could continue hiding, continue gathering intelligence while hoping the Council never connected the dots. Or they could prepare for revelation, build up their forces, and get ready to announce their existence on their own terms. Admiral Dunn argued for more time. Walter Nash argued for immediate review. 30 years had passed since the 5 colony ships disappeared into the nebula. Communications officer Lisa Morgan sat at her station on the orbital platform designated Watchtower 1 and monitored the sensors that covered the nebula's outer edge. Her shift was 12 hours long, and most days nothing happened. The dense clouds of gas and stellar dust made perfect cover, hiding the 17 systems that humanity now called home. Lisa had been born on the Endeavor during that first desperate year of exploration. She had never seen Earth, never walked under an alien sun in the galactic core. This hidden refuge was all she knew. The first years had been harder than anyone admitted. Admiral Richard Cole had died in the third year, his heart giving out from stress and age. The colony ships had found a habitable world in the fifth system they explored, a planet with breathable air and liquid water that they named New Terra. But habitable did not mean easy. The soil chemistry was wrong for Earth crops. The native bacteria made people sick until Dr. Helen Carter developed treatments. 2 of the colony ships had been cannibalized for parts to build the first settlements. People lived in prefabricated domes and worked 18-hour days just to survive. But humans were stubborn. They adapted. They learned. They built. Governor John Sanders oversaw New Terra now from the capital city of Foundation. The city was home to 200,000 people and growing every year. The domes had been replaced with real buildings made from local materials. The farms produced enough food to feed everyone with surplus left over. Children played in parks under a sky that was slightly more green than blue. It looked nothing like Earth, but it was home. Lisa's console beeped and she checked the readings. Just a comet passing through the outer nebula. Nothing to worry about. She logged it and went back to her routine scans. The monitoring stations were Richard Cole's last gift to the colony. Before he died, he had insisted they build an early warning network. The galaxy might have forgotten about them, but that did not mean they were safe. The stations watched the approaches to the nebula day and night, ready to send alerts if any ships came near. Chief Engineer Karen Blake was making changes that would reshape human civilization. In a laboratory deep beneath Foundation's surface, she worked on projects that would have terrified the Galactic Council. The Council had strict rules about artificial intelligence, genetic modification, and weapons development. They believed such technologies were too dangerous, too unpredictable. But Karen believed differently. Without those restrictions, human innovation had exploded. Her latest creation was an AI system that could coordinate an entire fleet simultaneously. Council species used basic computer systems that required direct input for every decision. Karen's AI could process millions of variables and execute complex maneuvers without human oversight. She called the system Oracle, and it was currently running simulations on the new ship designs. The ships themselves were another breakthrough. Faster engines, stronger hulls, energy weapons that made Council technology look primitive. Karen sometimes wondered what the aliens would think if they saw what humanity had achieved in just 30 years of isolation. Stephen Hughes was 26 years old and had never set foot on New Terra's surface. He was a pilot, born and raised on the orbital stations where humanity built their ships. His father had been one of the original exiles, a civilian engineer who married a ship captain. Stephen had inherited his mother's talent for flying. He could thread a needle with a cargo hauler and dance a fighter through an asteroid field without breaking a sweat. Today he was running patrol duty along the nebula's inner edge, a routine flight that should have been boring. His sensors picked up something unusual. A ship, or rather the remains of one. Stephen moved closer and felt his stomach drop. It was a scout vessel, definitely not human design. The hull markings identified it as Vrexen, one of the minor powers in Council space. The ship had been damaged, probably by the nebula's radiation storms, and drifted into the inner systems before its crew died. Stephen reported the finding immediately and waited for orders. Security Director Amanda Price arrived at the wreckage site within hours aboard a recovery ship. Amanda was 43, former military intelligence, and paranoid by nature. She suited up and entered the dead ship personally, searching for data cores and navigation logs. What she found made her blood run cold. The Vrexen had been deliberately probing the nebula's edge. Their logs showed multiple previous expeditions. They were searching for something. The emergency council meeting happened that same night. Governor Sanders, Karen Blake, Amanda Price, and Commander Vincent Shaw gathered in the secure conference room beneath the governor's office. Amanda presented her findings. The Vrexen had detected anomalous energy signatures coming from within the nebula. They suspected someone might be living in the hidden systems. They were investigating slowly and carefully, but eventually they would find New Terra. Vincent Shaw had been thinking about this problem for years. He was younger than the original exiles, one of the children who grew up during the journey. He had joined the military as soon as he was old enough and risen quickly through the ranks. Now he commanded the Colonial Defense Force, such as it was, 12 warships that had never seen combat, and 3,000 soldiers who trained for an enemy that might never come. Vincent had a different perspective on the Vrexin discovery. Maybe this was not a threat, but an opportunity. He laid out his proposal. Humanity had been hiding for 3 decades, growing stronger in isolation. But they had no intelligence about the wider galaxy. They did not know if the Council still controlled everything, if new wars had started, if the political situation had changed. They were blind, and that made them vulnerable. Instead of waiting for the galaxy to find them, Vincent suggested they start gathering information. Send out scouts, establish listening posts just beyond the nebula, maybe even plant agents in Council space. Karen Blake supported the idea immediately. Her AI systems could coordinate intelligence gathering across multiple systems. She had been working on genetic modification techniques that could alter human appearance enough to pass as certain alien species, at least under casual inspection. Amanda Price was more cautious, but agreed they needed better information. Governor Sanders listened to them all and made his decision. They would begin reconnaissance operations, carefully and gradually. They would learn everything they could about the galaxy that exiled them. The first scout ship left 6 months later. It carried a crew of 5 volunteers equipped with the best stealth technology Karen could design. Their mission was simple: reach the nearest Council system, observe, record, and return. They were not to make contact under any circumstances. 3 more scout ships followed over the next year, each probing different regions of Council space. Lisa Morgan watched them go from her station on Watchtower 1. She wondered what they would find out there beyond the nebula. Would the galaxy be the same as it was 30 years ago? Or had things changed? Would the Council even remember the humans they had exiled? Or had humanity become just another forgotten species that failed to meet galactic standards? Stephen Hughes wanted to volunteer for the scout missions but was rejected. He was too valuable as a pilot and too inexperienced in deep cover operations. Instead, he trained the next generation of pilots on the new ships coming out of the orbital factories. The ships were beautiful, sleek, and deadly in ways that Council vessels could never match. Every time Stephen took one out for a test flight, he felt a surge of pride. Humanity had been cast out and left to die. Instead, they had built something remarkable. New Terra continued to grow. 2 more planets in neighboring systems were being terraformed. The population had reached 500,000 across all settlements. Children born in exile were having children of their own. An entire generation had grown up knowing only the hidden worlds, only the story of how their parents and grandparents had been betrayed by the galaxy. These young people did not fear the Council. They had never bowed to alien authority. They were something new, something the galaxy had never encountered before. Governor Sanders stood on the observation deck of the orbital headquarters and looked down at New Terra below. The planet glowed like a jewel against the darkness of space. Light sparkled across 3 continents where human settlements pushed back the night. In orbit, construction docks built new ships while mining platforms processed asteroids into raw materials. It was an empire in miniature, hidden and growing in the darkness between stars. He thought about Admiral Cole sometimes, wondered what the old man would think if he could see what they had accomplished. The Admiral had died believing they might not survive another year. Now they were thriving, building, preparing. For what exactly, Sanders was not entirely sure, but he knew that humanity's isolation could not last forever. Eventually, the galaxy would find them or they would reveal themselves. When that day came, they needed to be ready. Captain Daniel Cross stood at the observation window of the ESS Horizon and watched the Galactic Council chamber through the reinforced glass. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his jaw was tight with tension. Inside that massive chamber, representatives from 47 alien species sat in judgment of humanity. The chamber itself was a marvel of architecture, built from materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Each species had their own section, arranged in a spiral that led up to the central podium where the Council Prime presided. Ambassador Linda Hayes stood at that podium now, her voice carrying through the translation devices that allowed all species to understand each other. Linda had been arguing for 3 hours. She presented evidence of human contributions to galactic society, the medicines they had developed, the technologies they had shared, the conflicts they had helped resolve. She showed records of human colonies that lived peacefully alongside alien settlements. She brought forward testimonies from alien citizens who called humans their friends. But Daniel could see from her posture that she knew it was futile. The decision had been made long before this hearing began. The Council Prime was a Valorian, a species that looked like walking crystals with too many limbs. Its name was unpronounceable to human tongues, so everyone called it Prime Sevix. When Linda finally finished her presentation, Prime Sevix remained silent for a long moment. The chamber was so quiet that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Then Sevix spoke, and the translation came through cold and final. Humanity was deemed incompatible with galactic civilization. The official charges were aggression, unpredictability, and disregard for established protocols. But everyone in that room knew the real reason. Humans learned too fast, adapted too quickly, and asked too many questions. In the 200 years since first contact, humanity had gone from primitive spaceflight to building ships that rivaled some of the older species. They had taken galactic technology and improved upon it. They had looked at problems that had stumped alien scientists for centuries and found new solutions. The older species found this threatening. The verdict was exile. All human colonies beyond the Sol system had to be evacuated within 30 days. Any human found in galactic space after that deadline would be arrested or killed. Earth itself would be blockaded, allowed to keep only the most basic jump drive technology. Humanity would be trapped in their home system, cut off from the stars they had worked so hard to reach. Linda Hayes stood frozen at the podium. Daniel could see her shoulders shaking. She had given everything to prevent this moment. Behind her, the alien delegates were already filing out, their duty done. Not one of them met her eyes. The hearing was over. Commander Paul Griffin found Daniel in the ship's mess hall 6 hours later. Paul was a big man with graying hair and a face that had seen too many difficult decisions. He sat down across from Daniel without asking and pushed a tablet across the table. Daniel picked it up and started reading. It was an evacuation schedule. 73 human colonies spread across 42 systems. Population estimates, ship requirements, timeline projections. The numbers were staggering. They had 30 days to move 8 million people. Paul had broken it down hour by hour. The largest colonies would take priority, but even with every available ship working around the clock, they would barely make it. Some of the smaller outposts might have to be abandoned entirely. Daniel felt sick reading it. These were people's homes, lives they had built, dreams they had chased across the stars. All of it being torn away because the galaxy feared what humanity might become. Dr. Helen Carter approached their table with her own tablet in hand. Helen was younger than both of them, barely 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was one of humanity's leading scientists, specializing in jump drive technology. She didn't sit down. Instead, she leaned close and spoke quietly. There was another option, she said. Not everyone had to go back to Earth. Some could go forward instead. Daniel and Paul both stared at her. She explained quickly. The galactic map showed vast regions of unexplored space beyond the rim, areas that no council species had bothered to chart because they were too far from established trade routes. These regions were shrouded in nebulae and stellar phenomena that made navigation difficult. But Helen had been studying them. She believed humans could survive there, maybe even thrive. They would need supplies, ships, people willing to take the risk. But it was possible. Paul shook his head immediately. It was too dangerous, he said. Those regions were unexplored for a reason. They could jump into a system with no habitable planets, no resources, no way to survive. They would be completely cut off from any help. It was suicide, but Daniel was thinking. He asked Helen how many ships they would need. She had already done the math. 5 colony ships fully loaded with supplies and equipment. Maybe 50,000 people total. They could slip away from the main convoy, make it look like a navigation error. By the time anyone noticed, they would be beyond the reach of council sensors. Engineer Marcus Webb joined the conspiracy that same night. Marcus was a practical man who built things with his hands and believed in solutions rather than problems. He listened to Helen's plan and started making lists. They would need fabricators, seed banks, medical equipment, weapons for defense. They would need people with the right skills. Farmers, doctors, soldiers, teachers. They would need volunteers who understood they might never see Earth again. Over the next week, the conspiracy grew. Admiral Richard Cole was the breakthrough. Richard was old guard military, respected by everyone in the fleet. When he agreed to lead the breakaway colony, others followed. Ship captains, civilian leaders, families who decided that exile to the unknown was better than prison in the Sol system. They gathered supplies quietly, transferred personnel, prepared the ships. The main evacuation began on schedule. Thousands of ships moving between colonies and Earth in a desperate rush against time. In the chaos, 5 colony ships altered their course. The Endeavour led the way with Admiral Cole on the bridge. Behind came the Pioneer, the New Dawn, the Frontier, and the Liberty. 50,000 souls who chose to risk everything rather than accept the galaxy's judgment. Daniel Cross stood on the bridge of the Endeavour as they made the final jump. Behind them, the civilized galaxy grew smaller. Ahead lay nothing but darkness and possibility. There were no guarantees out here, no safety nets, no one to call for help. They had only each other and the determination to survive. Linda Hayes stood beside him. She had refused to return to Earth, choosing instead to join the exiles. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. The Council thought they were punishing humanity, she said. But maybe they had done them a favor. Maybe humanity needed to be free of the galaxy's rules and expectations. Maybe out here in the darkness they could become something the Council never imagined. The jump drive activated and the stars stretched into lines of light. When they emerged, they were farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. The sensors showed a nebula ahead, vast and dense, hiding whatever lay beyond. Admiral Cole gave the order and the 5 ships moved forward into the unknown. Behind them, the galaxy forgot about the humans who had vanished into the dark. But those humans would remember. They would survive. And someday, they would return.